A strong income can improve your life, but it does not automatically create freedom. The real question is not just how much you earn, it is what your income is building after it actually arrives. Today, I am talking about how to use income to reduce your vulnerability, build assets, and create more options. Let's get into it. Welcome back, my leverage builders. You are listening to the Do Different Better show, where we build wealth, wisdom, and money moves for everyday people. I am your host and money co-pilot, Elaine Rasmussen. I'm the CEO of Do Different Better and the managing director of the Integrated Capital Fund. Today, I'm talking about how to use income to reduce vulnerability, build assets, and create more options in your life. Now, let's begin with something deceptively simple. Income is a flow, wealth is a stock. Income comes in the door. It is your salary, it is your business revenue, it might be consulting fees, it could be bonuses that you receive on a quarterly basis or annual basis. It is also commissions that you might be receiving. It could also be if you have a situation where you have royalties or investment income. That is all income that flows in. Possibly, maybe you're making rental income. You might even be getting several of these all at one time. But income is money flowing into your financial life. Wealth is different. Wealth is what you own, you control, you influence, or have accumulated that continues to create value after the money has arrived. That may include things like having a cash reserve. It could be retirement accounts. It could be brokerage accounts. It might also be real estate that you have investments, whether inherited or real estate that you have purchased or acquired. It can also look like business equity, intellectual property, ownership interest, or income producing assets. And again, you may have multiples of these at the same time. It could also be contractual rights. It also means systems that produce reoccurring revenue. I'm a big fan of the 4-day work week or the 4-hour work week. And that book really talks about that. But this distinction really matters because two people can earn exactly the same amount of money and live completely different lives. Here's what I mean. Imagine two professionals who each year earn $200,000 a year. On paper, they look similar. Same broad income. They might even be working in the same industry or in the same income category. Maybe they have similar titles, age, and even education. But here's the difference. Person A has high fixed expenses, consumer debt, minimal savings, very little invested outside of retirement, and a lifestyle that requires almost all of that $200,000 to keep moving every year. Now, person B also earns $200,000, but person B has 6 months of reserve, contributes consistently to their investments, has a lower baseline or financial obligations, owns equity in a business, has a brokerage account, and has enough financial flexibility to walk away from a bad job without immediately panicking. Same income, but very different levels of financial power. So you might be asking, well, why is that? Maybe person B got an inheritance or something. The reason why is because one person is primarily using income to maintain a lifestyle, while the other is using income to actually build their capacity. And I want everyone to be very careful here because I am not interested in turning this into one of those conversations where we shame people for enjoying their money. That's not the point. I am not telling you to never buy those beautiful shoes that you saw in the window. I'm not telling you to cancel every vacation or fly basic economy on every vacation. I'm not telling you that the path to wealth is to eat lentils in the dark while glaring suspiciously at your electric bill. None of that is the point of all of this. The point is that income must have more than one job. It can't just be to come in and pay the bills. If the only job for your income is supporting your current lifestyle, then your lifestyle may improve while your financial optionality remains flat. And sometimes it actually gets worse. That is where lifestyle inflation enters the picture. Maybe this is a new term for you, but what lifestyle inflation is that it happens when every increase in your income creates a corresponding increase in your expenses. Here's what I mean. You get a raise. Now you get your car upgraded. You go out and you're like, well, I'm a new executive. I need to have a car that reflects that. You get another raise. Your house gets bigger. You're like, oh, now we have to move into a different neighborhood. We need to have a better house. Next, you get promoted. Now your travel changes. You're flying first class every single place you go. The restaurants begin to change. Your wardrobe begins to change. The expectations change. And gradually, the new level of spending begins to feel normal. What was once considered luxury, right? We're going to treat ourselves, now becomes your baseline. And there is nothing inherently wrong with upgrading your life. I am all for upgrading your life. The problem is when your financial obligations rise at the same rate as your income. Hear me. Because then your higher income does not necessarily make you secure. It might for temporarily. It might make you feel good to have all of these newer things, but in the long run, it simply makes your life more expensive to maintain. That creates what I call the high earner trap. The high earner trap is not poverty. It is not financial failure. It is a mismatch between visible success and actual flexibility. So you may earn a lot, but you still feel unable to breathe. You feel the golden handcuffs, right? You may have heard that expression. You feel unable to change your career. You feel unable to leave an unhealthy work environment or personal environment. You're unable to invest in that opportunity that presents itself. That seems like it's the thing that you've been waiting for. You're unable to absorb a major expense without the weight of stress. Or you're unable to take 3 months off. You're unable to help family without destabilizing yourself. All in all, you're unable to say no. And if every decision has to be filtered through the question, can I afford my income to drop? Then your income may be high, but your optionality is still very low. This is the distinction I want all of you to sit with, because financial freedom is not simply about how much money comes in. It's really about how dependent is your life on the continuation of that income or that money, because it may be coming from other sources. Maybe it's a trust, right? This is especially important for executives, professionals, and my entrepreneurs listeners. If you are an executive, your salary may be excellent, top tier. But if your entire financial ecosystem depends on that one employer, then you may be highly compensated, but still concentrated. We hear this a lot with athletes, right? They make all this money, and then once their career is over, they have nothing left. If you are an entrepreneur, your company may generate significant revenue, but the business revenue is not your personal wealth. And that's a big mistake that entrepreneurs often make. They think that the company's money is their money. A business can have $2 million in annual revenue, and the owner can still have weak personal liquidity, very little, if any, retirement, no savings, and almost all of their net worth tied up in the company. So if the company folds, so do they. Revenue is not wealth. Income is not wealth. A large paycheck is not wealth. And even a high net worth, even a high net worth can be misleading if most of it is not liquid or inaccessible. So when we talk about leverage, we have to ask the questions: what is the income being converted into? Because that is where leverage actually begins. Income is powerful because it gives you something to deploy, and you need that. But it gives you choices as well. It gives you capital. It gives you the ability to acquire more assets. It reduces your vulnerability. And it allows you to invest in your own capacity. And all of those things are super important. It also provides you with an opportunity to access opportunities that may not necessarily be afforded to you. However, if your income simply comes in and goes back out again, you have circulation, not compound, right? And the goal is we want to compound our assets. I want you to think about that. You may be very good at generating money, but if the money never converts into something that lasts, grows, protects, or even multiplies, then your financial life remains dependent on continuous production. That is effort, not leverage. And we talked about effort in the last episode. So if you haven't listened to it, go check it out. But this is where we connect back to the earlier episodes in this whole entire series. I told you that leverage changes the relationship between your effort and your result. So let me just play this out for you. So if you earn $1 and you spend $1, your result is mostly immediate. You receive the income, you use the income, right? The exchange is complete, right? $1 in and $1 out. But if part of that dollar is converted into an asset, is converted into a reserve, is converted into a system or a business or an investment, then some portion of your past effort begins working for your future self. That is completely different. And that is what I'm talking about. That's the message that I want to get across to you. Not that you should live a life of poverty. Now, the money you earn through labor has been converted into something that can support you later in life. That could be 3 years, 2 years, 10 years, 20 years. That is one of the fundamental wealth building transitions. And it's a mindset as much as it is an activity. This is about moving from I work for money to I use money to acquire the things that can eventually work for me. That is a completely different shift. And this transition is often harder psychologically than it sounds, especially if you have money trauma, if you have a origin story that really has a toxic relationship with money or thoughts about money. Because many of us were raised to think about money primarily in two different categories. Money is for spending or money is for saving. But leverage requires a third category. Money that you deploy into some kind of mechanism, right? Money you deploy has a job. It has to work. Maybe the job is to protect you. Maybe the job is to grow. Maybe the job is actually to reduce future expenses or buy you time or lots of other things, but it's really about increasing your capacity. Maybe it's increasing your capacity to rest. Maybe it's increasing your capacity to travel. Maybe it's increasing your capacity to live in another country. Maybe it is to create access. Maybe it's to acquire ownership. Maybe it's here to require a more active, but all of this requires that you have an active relationship with money and not think of it as this thing that just comes in and comes out. And for some people, that is very, very uncomfortable because money has always been treated as something to earn, manage, and not lose. It has not been, they've not been taught that it's, or they've been taught that it's not something to direct strategically. So let me give you one more distinction. And this is the difference between financial stability and financial optionality, right? Financial stability says, okay, I can pay my bills. I am okay. I am going to be fine. That really matters because I know I've been in times where I wasn't sure how I was going to pay my bills. However, financial security says I can absorb a disruption. I can absorb my tires blowing out and now I got to get new tires because that also matters. Now, financial optionality says I have enough resources and flexibility that I can make decisions based on strategy, values, and opportunity, not simply immediate financial necessity. That is the different level. Now, when we come back, I'm going to be getting more into what all of this means and how to operationalize this. So I can't wait to see you after the break. You're listening to the Do Different Better Show. I'm your host, Elaine Rasmussen. Welcome back to the Do Different Better Show. I'm your host, Elaine Rasmussen. Okay, my leverage builders, we talked about in the first segment how we are thinking about money as a tool and leveraging money to actually exponentially multiply your effort, right? And thinking about how does money move from just being income and coming $1 in and $1 out, but reimagining how we construct the money and giving it jobs to do. Yes, one job is to pay our bills, but another job is to be able to create optionality for our future. And that future can be next month, next year, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, however you want to think about that. And so now we're going to make this a little bit more practical. We're going to bring this all the way home. Because one of the problems with the financial conversations that you hear on TikTok or on other social media is that they become very abstract very, very quickly. You'll hear things like build wealth, create freedom, invest in the future. And all of that is great. But what does that actually mean when your paycheck hits your bank account? How do you operationalize that? How do you operationalize when the business distributes profit or when your bonus hits your bank account or when the client pays the invoice? Or what if you get a windfall? Maybe it's a settlement. Maybe it's a bonus. What actually are you supposed to do? So I want to answer that question and introduce you to a very simple structure. Your income needs 3 jobs. Job number 1 is to support your life. Pay your bills, right? Job number 2 is reduce your vulnerability. And job number 3 is build future optionality. Now, those jobs will not receive equal amounts, obviously. And they can change depending on the season in your life. Your kids go off to college and you're empty nester. That looks different. But all 3 should exist. So let's now start with the first one. Job number 1. Support your life. This is the most obvious, right? You need somewhere to live. You need food. I don't know about you, but I love food. So I definitely need food. You need transportation, whatever that looks like. Maybe you're in a metropolitan city and you take the metro. Healthcare, utilities, clothing, family support. If you've got kids, they're in sports, those kinds of things. Maybe it's tuition. Maybe it's childcare. Or maybe you're taking care of aging parents and you have elder care responsibilities. You should also be able to experience joy, like travel, entertainment, restaurants. I love a good restaurant. I'm a big foodie, but also hobbies. If you don't know, I'm a big crocheter. It's a problem, right? Beauty, rest, pleasure. These are all things that whatever a meaningful life looks like to you, we also want to account for those things. I personally reject the idea that financial responsibility requires personal deprivation or permanent deprivation. That is not sustainable. We won't be happy people, we'll be miserable, and then we'll go the opposite direction. And it is often really unnecessary. The real question is not, how little can I spend? The better question is, what level of lifestyle allows me to enjoy my life without consuming all of the capital needed to build the future I say that I want? Not that Elaine says, but what do you say? That is a much more useful perspective because there is no universal answer. Every person is going to be different. Someone earning $80,000 has a different allocation challenge than someone earning $300,000. Someone supporting aging parents has different needs than someone who is not. Someone with a mortgage in New York has a different fixed cost reality than someone who owns their home outright in a lower cost market. So, I am not going to give you a magical percentage and pretend it works for everyone because it doesn't and it won't. And you'll just be upset with me. And I don't want that. What I will tell you is that your current lifestyle absorbs almost every available dollar, then your future income flexibility becomes highly dependent on continuing your income growth. And that is dangerous because income is never guaranteed. Maybe you need to change jobs. Maybe the market changes, right? We experienced COVID. Maybe you have health changes, yours or your partner's. Your industry might change. Think about what AI is doing to a lot of industries. Your business could change, technology can change, your family needs change. So the first job of your income is to support your life, but not to consume your entire future. That leads to job number two. Job number two is to reduce vulnerability. This is the least glamorous job, right? And it may be the most strategically important because before you can chase maximum return, part of your money should make you harder to destabilize. That might mean building a cash reserve, right? I like to call this your brick house, right? Paying down high interest debt. Or actually, this is your buffer. It could be improving your insurance coverage. It could be reducing some of your fixed costs, getting rid of them, that pesky debt that you have, building your business reserve, catching up on any deferred maintenance, whether it be on your home or in your business, your property, diversifying your income sources. Maybe it's removing financial commitments that have kept you trapped, paying off that big, huge bill. This is where people sometimes get impatient and then say, but couldn't that money be invested instead? Oh, maybe, but leverage is not always about maximizing the upside. Sometimes leverage is about reducing your downside because vulnerability weakens your negotiating position. Here's an example. Let's say you hate your job. We've all been there at one point in our life. You know that it is time to leave, but you have 1 month of savings and a mortgage, a car payment, tuition obligation, and revolving credit debt. Your financial vulnerability changes your ability to make the decision that you want to make, or at least the timing of it. You may still leave that job, but your options are very narrow. Now, imagine the same person with 9 months of reserve, a lower consumer debt obligation, and a side income stream. Same professional problem, different negotiating power. That is financial leverage. Or imagine a business owner. The business has one major client generating 60% of the revenue of the company. There are no business reserves. Payroll depends on the client paying on time. That entrepreneur may technically own a business, but really, I like to say they own a job, right? but the business is highly, highly vulnerable. The owner cannot negotiate aggressively with the client because that's the only client or the predominant client. They cannot easily fire the client. They cannot tolerate a delayed invoice. They cannot invest in experimentation or finding new markets, finding new products, finding new services that they can offer to other clients. They cannot withstand any sort of disruption. But guess what? Reserves can change that. Diversification of clients can change that. Lower fixed costs can change that. So when I say use income to reduce vulnerability, I mean deliberately, specifically, and intentionally removing the financial conditions that force you to make bad decisions or keep in one. This is one reason I believe cash gets underestimated in certain wealth building conversations. Cash sitting in a savings account may not produce an exciting return, but cash can produce something else. It can produce time. Time to make a decision, time to find a better job, time to negotiate, time to recover. Maybe it's a toxic work environment and you need a couple months off to get your head together. Time to reposition a business, time to handle an emergency without liquidating an investment at the wrong time. And time is a form of leverage, often underestimated and underutilized, because urgency is expensive, almost always. Think about going to the emergency room. How much is it to go to the emergency room versus going to the doctor? That's a perfect example. People make bad financial decisions when they have no runway. They accept bad deals. They sell assets at bad times. They have to use expensive credit. They have to remain in unhealthy jobs. They take on clients that they should not take on because they're desperate. Maybe they delay medical care or skip strategic opportunities, all because there is no room. So, one of the best uses of income may be buying breathing room. Now, I want to pause here because this can become overly conservative if we are not careful. The goal is not to build reserves forever and never deploy capital, never spend it. There is a point at which extreme caution becomes another form of just avoiding making decisions. You do not need 5 years of cash sitting idle before you make an investment. You do not need every debt eliminated before you begin to build assets. And you do not need perfect certainty. The goal is not zero risk. The goal is intentional risk and calculated risk. You want enough protection that you can take strategic risk without one mistake destroying your entire money system. That is very different. Now let's move on to job number 3. Job 3 is building future optionality. This is where your income begins to move from maintenance towards leverage. Here the question is, what can I buy, build, own, or fund today that expands my choices tomorrow? This may include investments like retirement account, right? A brokerage account. And when we say retirement account, if you can, matching to the max of your employer, right? It could be real estate. It could be co-investing. It could be business equity. That comes in the form of angel investing. It may be in business acquisition. I've talked about my business acquisition journey. It could be strategic education that you can leverage into something else. Or it could be hiring. It could be a new distribution channel for your business or your products and services. Perhaps it's a legal structure, moving into a trust, or it's a professional platform, something that either creates ownership, increases capacity, or improves your access. And this is where we need to distinguish between spending and investing in a very broad sense. A purchase can be useful and still not be an investment. For example, a $5,000 vacation may be deeply meaningful. It may restore you. It may create amazing memories. It may be exactly what you and your family needs. But unless it creates some measurable economic return, we should not pretend that it's an investment. Sometimes spending is just spending, and that is okay. My goal for you is that it is intentional and it is purposeful, right? That you know that you're doing without the expectation. And ideally, you're doing it not at the expense of your future self, right? The problem comes when we label every desirable expense as a self-investment because we do not want to acknowledge that there is a trade-off. And there is a trade-off. I'm not saying that the trade-off is bad, but we need clearer language. Sometimes money supports life. Some money protects life, and some money builds future options. All three are 100% legitimate, but they are different. Now, let's make this a little bit more nuanced. Imagine you receive a $20,000 bonus at the beginning of the year or at the end of the year. You might be asking, Elaine, what should I do with it? The answer is not automatically invest all of it, right? Maybe you have a $15,000 credit card debt at 29% interest. Paying that debt may be the highest return move because now you're not going to have that monthly payment and you can leverage that money to do something else. Maybe you have no emergency fund. Building a cash reserve may be more strategic. Maybe your finances are stable and you're already investing consistently. Then perhaps part of that money could go into a brokerage account or a business opportunity. Maybe investing in a small business, maybe it is buying some equity into a project. Maybe you run a company and spending $10,000 on a key hire that will free 15 hours a week in time that will allow you to generate another $50,000 in revenue. That may be your leverage. Maybe you're a consultant and $7,500 spent developing a strong sales platform and speaking materials could create a pipeline of corporate engagements that can turn into thousands or hundreds of thousands of dollars. And finally, here's another example. Maybe you're an executive considering a prestigious $40,000 program because you are bored. That may or may not be leverage. Ask what the actual return mechanism is. Will it change your earning power in your job or in a future job or in your business? Will it expand your network? Will it expand your access? Will it expand your credibility because you're now in a different room? Will it expand your ownership? Or is it simply just another credential for credential's sake? I find that a lot of women make that decision. Again, not every expense must produce a return, but if we are calling it something strategic, we should be able to articulate the strategy. So here's the framework I want you to use when new income arrives. Ask, what does my life need? What does my vulnerability require in this moment? What does my future need me to build? Those three questions are more powerful than simply asking, can I afford this? Because can I afford it is a low bar. Well, the answers might be a simple yes. You may technically be able to pay for something while still undermining your larger financial goals or your larger financial positioning. Instead, I want you to ask, what role should this money play? And over time, the balance should begin shifting. Early in your career, a larger percentage may go towards supporting your life, but as vulnerability reduction should become more possible. So we have just talked about how the three jobs of money and how you want to think about them and how you want to leverage. And as we go into the next segment, now I'm going to be really bringing it all together. So you're listening to the Do Different Better show. Don't forget to check out the website, www.dodifferentbetter. And you can always hit me up on Instagram at Do Better with Elaine. I can't wait to get into this final segment to talk about how we're actually going to bring this all together. I will see you after the break. Welcome back to the Do Different Better show. I'm your host, Elaine Rasmussen. We've been talking about how the different jobs of money. And so really thinking about job money, one of the jobs of money is, yes, absolutely to pay your bills, but also it is also to be able to protect you for the future. So making sure that you put some away and take care of your optionality, but then also using your money to be able to build future capacity. Now, let's take everything that I have discussed with you and we're going to move it into action, because saying use your income strategically sounds good, but how do you actually decide what to do with that next dollar? So I'm going to give you 4 conversion paths that you can go down, and you just kind of sit and listen to see which one lands for you. Your income can be converted into protection, ownership, capacity, and access. Those are the 4 things that you want to think about, or the 4 categories that you can put them in a box to give you more useful way to evaluate your financial decisions. And it might be a good way for a baseline for you to be able to have conversations with your partner. But let's talk about conversion 1, income to protection. Protection reduces your downside risk. This may include things like your emergency savings, it's your insurance, health insurance, life insurance, it's debt reduction, right? Getting rid of that big credit card that's at 29, 28, 30% interest. It's reserves for taxes at the next year. It could also be business reserves or legal protection, estate planning. That's a big one. It's very underutilized. It also could be maintenance or diversification. Protection is sometimes treated as boring, and because it does not feel like it's growth, but think of it as this stable foundation for you. But protection preserves the assets and the opportunities that you already have. Think about your insurance. You may never receive a financial return from an insurance premium, but in fact, ideally, you do not. But insurance can prevent one catastrophic event from wiping out years of wealth building, right? Think about insurance for your home and your roof comes off or a tree falls through your roof. Okay, is your insurance premiums every month going to be able to do some financial benefit in your retirement? No, but it prevents you. I don't know if you've checked out how much a roof, I just got my roof done not too long ago. They're like $30,000, $40,000. So to know that protection is there so you don't have to worry about it or panic or make a costly decision to have to borrow that money under very terrible financial terms is what it's protecting you against. That deserves attention. Now think about conversion number 2, income to ownership. Ownership is one of the clearest ways to convert current earnings into future wealth. You use money earned through labor to acquire assets. And that could be a variety of different things. That it could include investing in the public market. It could be investing in a real estate property or co-investing in a real estate property. It is business equity. It is buying employee stock or gaining your employee stock. It also could be a business acquisition. It also could be intellectual property that you leverage, right? Or other ownership assets. Why does ownership matter? It's because employees get paid. Owners participate in the upside. That is the big difference. That does not mean everyone needs to start a business. That is not what I'm suggesting. Not everybody is built to run a business. Believe me, I know. Far from it. Business ownership carries risk, but your financial life should ideally include some form of ownership. You want at least part of your wealth building strategy attached to assets that can grow without requiring an equal increase in your labor or effort. That is leverage. So here's an example. You can invest $1,000 that you do not have to work an additional hour every time the asset changes in value. If you own intellectual property and someone licenses it, that same underlying asset can create revenue more than one time and multiple times at the same time. If you own equity in a company that grows, you participate in the value that is created in that company. Ownership gives you exposure to compounding money, and compounding is perhaps the most elegant form of leverage because time begins doing part of the work, not just your labor. Now, here's conversion number 3. Conversion is income to capacity. The capacity is especially important for ambitious professionals and entrepreneurs. Sometimes the smartest use of money is not buying an investment. It is increasing your capacity. Capacity investments may include things like hiring additional help, whether it's around the house or to be an executive assistant. It's technology, it's administrative support, it's professional services. Maybe it's offsetting, managing your website. It's training, it's coaching, it's better systems to work more efficiently and more effectively. It also could include automation. AI is really good for that. Healthcare, anything that helps you produce more value, protect your energy, and move out of low value work. But capacity investments also need scrutiny. Just because something improves your experience does not mean it increases your capacity. Okay? So here's the question that you can ask yourself. What changes after I spend this money? What do I actually gain? Do I just gain good feelings? That's fine, but let's just know that that's what we're doing. Do I increase revenue? Do I reduce the amount of errors, which cost time and money? Will I make better decisions? Will I improve my health? Will I reduce my stress? Will I create a system? Do I access expertise that I actually lack that will make me more valuable in the future? If the answer is yes, then there may be a clear case for leverage. For example, an entrepreneur spends $1,500 a month on an operations coordinator. On the surface, that is an expense. However, and I've talked about this even in my business, if the coordinator frees up 20 hours of the founder's time and the founder uses that time on sales, strategy, building partnerships, and product development, the expense may create significant leverage. So, of course, the founder uses those 20 hours to micromanage. Now, of course, if the founder uses the 20 hours to micromanage the coordinator, we may not have achieved anything except more expensive version of the same problem. Leverage requires behavior change as well. You have to actually release the work, right? And that I know is hard for entrepreneurs and for leaders. Conversion number 4, income to access. This one is very, very nuanced and not necessarily a clear mathematical calculation. Money sometimes can give you access, professional association, industry events, executive education, strategic travel, right? Membership communities, right? Maybe it's a club that you are going to be in. Maybe it's a conference, or maybe it's media support, getting your name out there and getting yourself on television or in key public networks. It could be an advisory network, but access is where people can waste enormous amounts of money because prestige is often confused with strategy. Not every expensive room is a valuable room, and maybe it's just not valuable now. Some rooms are just expensive rooms. So here's some of the questions you can ask in advance. Who will be there? What decisions happen there? What relationships matter, or which ones am I looking for? And what will they do as a result of me being successful in gaining that relationship? What opportunities exist? Do I have a strategy for engaging? Do I have something relevant to offer? Time, talent, or treasure? What do I want to happen after I attend or participate or join? If you cannot answer those questions, you may be buying proximity and not necessarily buying leverage. The goal is not just to be seen in the room. The goal is to create value from the access. Now, I want to give you what I call the optionality test. Okay? If you're driving or taking a walk or taking a run, bookmark this. You can come back to it later. Before you make a significant financial decision, especially one framed as strategic, ask yourself, does this reduce my vulnerability? Does this create ownership? Does this increase my capacity? Does this increase my access? Does this create or preserve options? Does it increase my fixed obligations? Does it require more labor later? What am I giving up by choosing this? How reversible is my decision? If the expected return does not happen, can I absorb the downside? And that last question really matters because leverage magnifies. It can magnify your gains. It can magnify mistakes. Okay. A business loan can accelerate growth, but it can also accelerate insolvency. It can break the business. And I've seen that happen so many times. A hire can increase capacity, or it can just add overhead. So here are the things that I really want you to think about as you're thinking about making the decisions around how things can actually present themselves as leverage opportunities, and wanting to be mindful that we don't necessarily put ourselves in the trap. So now I want to bring us all the way back to the beginning. Income matters. Earn more if you can. Negotiate. Increase your value. Build revenue. Take the promotion. Grow the business. Charge appropriately. Develop new income streams. And I want you to be clear, I am not dismissing income. Income is incredibly important, but do not confuse income with your earning capacity with building wealth. A bigger income can create a bigger life, or it can be a more expensive cage. The difference is what you actually do with it. A leveraged financial life gradually converts earned income into protection, ownership, capacity, access, and ultimately options. Options to stay, options to leave, options to rest, options to invest, options to say no. Options to design your life with more intention, and that is the point. Your income is not the finish line. It is fuel. Thank you for joining me on this episode of the Do Different Better show. I'm your host, Elaine Rasmussen, and I can't wait to see you next week when I show you how to do different better.